my husband was at a conference recently, he met some Norwegians and he mentioned my YouTube channel to them. They suggested I make a cake, and as soon as I heard about it, I knew I had to try it because in Norwegian it's called World's Best Cake. Well, if the claims are that big, then we need to try it out for science, right? So this is 2 layers of sponge cake baked with a meringue on top of the sponge cake, and then they are sandwiched together with a fluffy pastry cream in between. So join me today as we explore the origins of this cake and also test out a recipe to see if the claims are true. Let's get started. Because the pastry cream needs to be fully chilled to assemble the cake, we'll be starting with that. To a medium-sized saucepan, add 8 egg yolks, 90 grams or a scant ½ cup of sugar, and 2 tablespoons or 16 grams of cornstarch or potato starch. Whisk that all together until smooth, and then whisk in 600 milliliters or 2½ cups of whole milk. Bring that mixture to the stove and turn the heat to low while you add in the gelatin. To this, we'll be adding gelatin sheets, which will help the cream to stay set when slicing into the cake. You can buy these on Amazon if you live in the US, and you might be able to find them in a grocery store if you live in Europe. Let me know, do they sell them at a local store near you? They don't sell gelatin leaves at stores here in the US, which is why I sought them out on Amazon. These are hard, clear sheets of gelatin that incorporate really well into creamy liquids. You'll need 5 sheets for this recipe, and you just cut them up into small pieces into the mixture and then whisk constantly until they're dissolved. Now you can turn the heat up to about medium and whisk constantly until it starts to thicken like a pudding. When you can draw your finger on the back of a spoon and it leaves a trail, then it is thick enough. Once you've reached the right consistency, turn off the heat and stir in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Alternatively, you could add in seeds from a vanilla pod instead, and you would add those in with the milk at the beginning instead of at the end. I usually don't add vanilla pods because they tend to be about $30 here, so I usually just go for vanilla extract. And then I always pass my pastry cream through a fine mesh sieve to catch any eggs that may have curdled, and I always get a few at the bottom, so that's why I make sure to do this every time, because it ensures a smooth pastry cream. Then you're going to put plastic wrap directly on the surface so that it doesn't form a skin when you're cooling it down in the refrigerator. And then you're going to refrigerate it for 3 to 4 hours or until it's completely chilled through. And while that's nearing the end of chilling, we'll begin on the cake. To make the cake batter, we're going to cream together 112 grams or 1 stick of softened unsalted butter, with 100 grams or ½ a cup of granulated sugar and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Beat that all together until creamy, and then gradually add in 4 egg yolks, one at a time, fully incorporating after each addition. You're also going to mix in 4 tablespoons of whole milk. I actually forgot to do that when I was filming this, so my batter ended up being a little bit thicker than it should have been. While I'm doing this, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this cake. It originated on a little Norwegian island named Hinnøya in a town called Harstad. A little cafe called Café Alliance opened in the town in the 1920s on the main street and was owned by 2 sisters who were from Kvæfjord. These sisters were considered to be pioneers in establishing Norwegian cafe culture, and they wanted to expand their cafe offerings, so they purchased 2 recipes from a Danish pastry chef for 200 kroner, a hefty price back then, about $20 US. One of the recipes that she purchased was the cake I'm showing you today, and it was actually in Danish called king cake. And it also had a lot more almonds than this recipe has. She altered the recipe to contain fewer almonds because they were really expensive at the time. And eventually the cake became popular and became known throughout as Kvæfjordkake or Kvæfjordkake, referencing the place that the sisters were from. And since that time, the recipe has been passed down through word of mouth, so no one actually has the original recipe anymore, but its popularity never waned. In the 1970s, it became a nationwide favorite instead of just a regional favorite when it was featured in Norwegian weekly magazine. And later on, in 2002, it was dubbed as Norway's national cake when a radio show had voters choose their favorite Norwegian cake, and 69% of voters chose Kvæfjordkake, and then it became known as World's Best. Now whisk together 150 grams or 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour with 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. Then incorporate that into your wet ingredients, and I did it first with a spoon and that ended up not working very well, and then I just used my beater just to incorporate it just until it was fully combined. You don't want to overmix this to create a tough batter. Now you're going to line a baking tray with parchment paper, and a little trick for batters that you have to spread across parchment is to put little dots of batter onto the tray to use as a glue. This helps reduce the chances that the parchment will slip around while you're spreading the batter. Now you're going to spread the batter with an offset spatula if you have one. That's the easiest way to do it. And you'll see here mine didn't spread that well, and it's actually because I forgot to add those 4 tablespoons of milk, so my batter was a little bit thicker than usual, and I was confused why it was like that. I just didn't realize I had skipped that step. But anyways, this will be easier for you if you have a thinner batter. And you're going to spread it into a large rectangle. Do it as evenly as possible, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and it also doesn't have to be the exact size of the baking sheet. About an inch of there, you'll have about an inch around the perimeter of the cake. After you spread the batter, briefly set it aside to make the meringue. In a medium bowl, put your 4 leftover egg whites and begin beating on high. And when they start to get foamy, gradually add in 200 grams or 1 cup of sugar. And I recommend using superfine sugar here, which is known as caster sugar in the UK. It's a much finer grain of sugar and gives you a lesser chance of a failed meringue from the sugar not properly dissolving into the whites. You're going to beat for quite a while until you get stiff, glossy peaks, and when you can dip your finger into the meringue and when you rub your finger together, you cannot feel any grains of sugar left. Once those grains of sugar are fully dissolved and you have reached stiff peaks, then you're completely done with the meringue. Then you're going to spoon the meringue onto the cake batter and spread it out, and just spread it out in a rustic fashion to give it some waves and peaks. It'll bake really nicely that way, and leave about a 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter perimeter from the edge of the cake batter. And then you're going to sprinkle sliced almonds over this. I forgot to do this as I did the other. This was an off baking day. I don't know what was wrong with me, but you'll see that I actually add the almonds after I put it in the oven, because I quickly remembered that I had forgotten that step. Then you're going to bake this on the middle rack in a 325 degree Fahrenheit or 165 degrees Celsius preheated oven for 30 minutes, or until the meringue is dry and lightly golden. Then you're going to remove it from the oven and place it on a cooling rack until it is completely cool. Once your cake has fully cooled, you're going to work on the filling for assembling the cake. You're going to put 200 milliliters or a little bit over 3/4 cup of heavy whipping cream into a bowl, and you're going to beat that until you get stiff peaks. And then you're going to remove your pastry cream from the refrigerator, and it should be solid and fully chilled at this point. So you're going to put your beaters into that, the ones that you just used for the whipping cream, and just give it a good beat to get it nice and light and fluffy. And then you're going to fold the whipped cream into the pastry cream. And this will lighten it up, but you will still have the structure in that pastry cream from the gelatin that was added into it. Now you're going to assemble the cake by cutting the cake in half. And if you're looking at this meringue and thinking it's a bit flat, you are correct. This is a failed meringue. Something was up with my sugar. I think it had something to do with the humidity in the air. I filmed this on a very humid day. Plus, I was just having an off day when it came to baking. If you haven't seen my other videos, this isn't usual for me. I do have my off baking days, but it's few and far between. So I actually remade this cake off camera and it turned out beautifully. So it was not the recipe itself, it was just an off day. You're going to put the pastry cream onto one half with the meringue facing the bottom, and then you're going to put the top half on top of that with the meringue facing upwards. And then you can serve it from there, and you slice it into squares to serve, and it actually gets better with time, so you can actually store this in the refrigerator for a day before you serve it, and it allows that cream to soak into the sponge cake and make it a little bit moister. So this was delicious, so let's see how it turned out.
Well, for one thing, this cake is gorgeous. I've never seen anything quite like it, but we should try it and see. Is it the world's best cake? Let's find out. Well, that is delicious. I wouldn't call it the world's best cake I've ever had, but I definitely would rank it up there with the top ones. So this is very good. It actually reminds me of a pavlova, but with sponge cake sandwiched in there, which is basically what it is. There's a cream in the middle and meringue on top, and there just happens to be sponge cake in there too. So that's really good. I do recommend trying this. I really like it. Have you ever had anything like this? I haven't. I've never baked a cake with meringue on top. I've baked cookies with meringue on top, but never a cake. Remember those cookies I made last year, the Hungarian non-plus ultras? If you liked those, you would like these. So I definitely highly recommend this cake. It is delicious. And in case you missed my announcement, I started a monthly email newsletter where I do a deep dive into a European culinary topic. So if that's something that you're interested in, I hope you will sign up. You'll find the link directly below the video in the description box. Just enter your email and you will receive the monthly newsletter. And like I mentioned, this cake reminded me a little bit of the Hungarian non-plus ultra cookies that I made last summer. I hope you will watch that video next. Those are 2 butter cookies sandwiched together with apricot jam, and on top of each cookie is a cap of meringue. They're absolutely delicious and so elegant to serve at a party. And I will see you next time.